Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to what is now the third session in the FIG Norwich series of seminars. As Tim said, I'm Steve Davidson. I chair the financial industry group locally. It's probably better known as FIG Norwich, but the only thing I'm going to say about FIG today is that our central purpose, the central purpose of FIG, is to develop a thriving financial cluster in Norwich. It's about our passion for living and working in Norwich and Norfolk, both now and in the future. And seminars like today are a great example of how we can share best practice locally. For this third seminar in the series, we've been delighted to collaborate with Tim and Tech East, and also to work with the police, which is the local police in Norfolk and Suffolk Constabularies, and also the National Cyber Security Centre. It's not really very often I get to say something like I've been working with the police, so a little bit of excitement there for me. But I think you'll see that they've put together a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation for us today. One of the key topics raised in the FIG business survey that we conducted earlier in the year was the challenge for firms and individuals generally relating to cyber issues, especially post the first COVID-19 lockdown. It's been a consistent thread through the business survey and also the two seminars that we've run so far in partnership with MHA, Larkin Gowan and KPMG. So cybersecurity is a very topical and important subject currently. Indeed, I'll probably give someone away here. I'm a Manchester United supporter, and you'll all be sort of sticking pins in the screen at the moment, but you probably heard that they've recently had a ransomware attack on their IT systems. So I think it's now concluded, but I suspect they'll now have decided to spend a little bit more on the defense. But they might have to spend some more on IT as well, but never mind. Hopefully that hasn't gone down like a lead balloon in certain quarters. Anyway, without any further ado, I have great pleasure in introducing our presenters today. Is John Greenwood from the local police in Norfolk and Suffolk Constabularies, and he's a cyber security advisor. And we have Chris from the National Cyber Security Centre. John and Chris are going to present jointly, and they've asked me to encourage you to ask any questions or express opinions or anything during the session if you want, rather than waiting till the end. But of course, we'll give an opportunity at the end as well. If you can please input any questions you have on the chat line, that would be great. There'll be a number of polls during the session, which hopefully you'll be able to answer, and that'll give us some feel for how it's affecting businesses locally. And just last but not least, the slides will be posted on the FIG Norwich website after the session, so if you need to get a copy. So I hope you enjoy the session very much, and I'll just hand over to John and Chris now. Okay, thank you, and I'll speak later.
Great, thank you very much, Steve. So yes, hello everyone. My name is John Greenwood. I'm the cybersecurity advisor for Norfolk and Suffolk Constabulary, and I'm going to be presenting today with my colleague Chris from the National Cyber Security Centre. So there's going to be to and fro in this presentation. There is going to be polls, as has already been mentioned. So hopefully we can get involved there. It is anonymous. It's just to help me identify different areas to take the presentation. I'm going to be referring to relevant local case studies as well, all anonymized, obviously. So hopefully we're all here for the same thing. We've got quite a while for this. So we're going to take it nice and slow. So any questions, pop them in the chat, and if relevant, we'll answer them at the time, or we'll come back to them at the end. Okay, so Norfolk and Suffolk Cybercrime Unit, we are a joint force unit covering both counties. I work in the unit alongside the investigators. So my guidance comes directly from National Cyber Security Centre via Regional Special Operations Unit, URSU, and then me at a local level. And we're looking here at cyber-dependent crime mostly. So the difference here, cyber-dependent crime is crime that can only take place using computers, so hacking, denial of service attacks and things like that. And if that doesn't mean anything to you now, hopefully at the end of this it will. And then cyber-enabled crimes are traditional crimes where the reach can be increased using technology. So phishing emails, that did used to happen, via post, if we remember that. But now it can happen via email as well, and text message and different areas like that. So the investigators I work with, they work on the pursue strand. So that's the investigations, the arrests and things like that. And then what I'm here today to talk to you about is protect. So that's increasing people's defense and knowledge around cybersecurity. I also work on cyber choices, which is aiming at preventing young people becoming involved in cybercrime. And then cyber prepare as well, which is about increasing business resilience around policy and procedures. And we're going to touch on that today. So hopefully what you'll get from today is the key areas that we are seeing as attacks to businesses, and also some useful resources that you can implement and useful information where you can go to find that information and apply it to your own systems. Chris, feel free to jump in whenever you want. So we've got a poll here. Has your company been a victim of a cybersecurity breach in the last 12 months? So hopefully this will pop up on the screen. You can see some stats in the background. You see the average cost there, just over £3,000. We're going to look on the next slide at other elements that is associated to that. So you should have a little pop-up on your screen. Click your vote. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds. Like I say, this is anonymous. This is just really to see if the picture is reflective of national trends. Okay, Bridget, how are we getting on there? Can we get the results, please? Hopefully we've got some people have answered that one. Excellent. Okay, so we've got 76% saying no, 6%, only one person saying yes, a couple of people not sure, one person not applicable. So not sure, it could just be you're not the right person, it might have happened, or you're a new starter. One of the interesting things here, and I'm sure this will be backed up as we go through here, sometimes you may have been a victim, or you might not know yet. So for instance, I'm going to talk about some ransomware that Steve's already mentioned today, with examples. And ransomware, sometimes people have been in a system for up to 6 months, making sure they know everything there is to know about the system. But thanks very much for those answers. So we talked about costs. The thing I really want to point out here is that isn't considered in that financial cost is the reputational damage that these sorts of things happen. These sorts of things mean to a business if it gets out, and also, the judgment on the business on how they acted and what they did in reaction to a cyber breach. Chris, did you want to jump in on this one at all?
Absolutely, John. So the Department for Digital Culture and Media Studies reported this finding earlier this year. And what we really need to consider is that a cybersecurity breach isn't just about the short-term and direct costs, so the financial theft, the ransom, the staff response time, but as John said, it's the reputational damage, which is very hard to recover from. Many organizations which have suffered a cybersecurity breach where can take months, years to recover from, and something like reputational damage is a lot harder to recover and gain back, and especially the loss of new and existing customers. So just consider what a cyber breach may have in your organization in terms of your customer set and the relationship you have with your supply chains. So it's really important that organizations take a holistic approach when it comes to the risk assessment of a cybersecurity breach, that you don't just account for the financial direct short-term costs, but you look at the long-term and indirect costs as well.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks very much. Just to give you an example of this, we're dealing currently, or last week it actually happened, there was a ransomware on a business near Bury. And one of the things the CEO told me was that he appreciated that there was going to be an impact, but he didn't realize on the amount of downtime and the amount of recovery time that was going to be needed. And also they've gone ahead and implemented a load of new security measures. The costs there are a lump sum cost that hadn't been accounted for. So all of these things need to be considered.
And it's that challenge of moving to maintaining business as usual. What we often find is that businesses are so reliant on their IT infrastructure network just that consideration as to what you would do if your network went down or you couldn't access your emails or computers. I don't know about you, John, but I wouldn't like going back to work to do pen and paper for too long.
Yeah, and it is quite debilitating. If you think we move lots of systems online or onto computers without those systems, is there a backup? Have we got policies in place? Excellent. Okay, so this slide, what we're looking at here is the main types of attackers and the main types of attacks we're seeing locally, regionally, and nationally. These are some of the areas we're going to cover today. So we are going to be talking about phishing, account compromise, denial of service attack, and malware, ransomware, and insider threat. So we are covering what I consider at the moment to be sort of the big five, especially around business areas. But as you'll notice, most of this presentation is going to be relevant to everyone, individuals, businesses, organizations, charities. All of this information is fairly generic for most areas. So just wanted to point that out. Chris, do you want to add anything on the attackers here?
Not particularly, other than to say that the threat actors is forever growing, and as John mentioned, cyber-enabled and cyber-dependent crime is now becoming so accessible to a group of people who have little to no skill. You can go onto the dark web, you can buy malware, and you can buy cyber attacks as a service. So you can pay somebody to attack an organization on your behalf. So what we're finding now is that cyber crime is becoming a lot more accessible to a group of actors who may not have the cyber capabilities or cyber experience, yet it's very easy for them to instigate and implement. So it's important that organizations identify that when we talk about threat actors, we're not talking necessarily about just about your skilled hackers in your nation states, but also about the script kiddies who are just trying to make a quick buck.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that links in as well. So I mentioned cyber choices idea, which is preventing young people getting involved in cybercrime. We've had I've got one person on the books who did a denial of service attack against his own school. And he did this because he wanted to get out the next lesson, but he didn't appreciate that actually it took his school offline. And because his school shared an ISP, an internet service provider, with a number of local other organizations, it affected their internet as well. And he did it twice over a week and a half. And both times it affected, a doctor's surgery, it affected a small business, a charity, a primary school, until they identified the issue and blocked that. So it's not just the impact it can have. That was one of the things getting across to that young person was obviously the law around it, but the larger picture, the bigger impact it could have.
That's a good point there, John, about the interconnectivity businesses have. So it's not just an impact to your business, but to the wider organizations who are dependent on your services and your systems as well. As you say, a local school will have those links with other local businesses.
Yeah. Okay. So mentioned 6 key areas. These are the ones we're covering. This is the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure Chris and I would be quite happy to chat about cybersecurity for hours. You'd definitely get bored. So like I say, we're going to have polls. It's going to be interactive. If you want any more information afterwards, we're going to give you some resources and links as well. So the first area I want to talk around is phishing, but the key element here is social engineering. So social engineering, we've probably all heard the term. We probably all do this. Humans are very good at social engineering, but we're also very good at falling for social engineering. So it's all about someone trying to trick someone else into doing the wrong thing. Now, there's different terms for this. So phishing, smishing, and vishing. So phishing via email, smishing via SMS, and vishing, which is voice solicitation as well, sometimes known as. So all of these are, the old day alternative would have been someone knocking on the door trying to sell you something. That would have been in-person vishing. But all of these come back to the same thing. They are trying to trick the user into doing something, but there's different levels of these. Okay, so what we're going to look at next is just some general things which is relevant across all areas. Okay, so we have got a question coming up about phishing, but you probably all receive phishing emails on your personal accounts, perhaps on work accounts. The key thing here is that a lot of email services will filter this out, hopefully. So there's some stats coming up on the next slide as well. But ultimately, someone is trying to disguise themselves as a trustworthy entity. And there's lots of ways they can do that. They can copy a email that an official company has sent out and change the links. They can prey on the psychological side of it. So, for instance, the sense of urgency. You have just been charged £200 thanks to your, PayPal withdrawal. Please click here if it wasn't you. So, ultimately you're on the back foot there. It could link to cloud documents. This is quite a new attack way. So you link to a cloud document, then you do a download, and then some malicious code runs. Numbers, phone numbers, text message numbers can be spoofed. There's apps for that and websites, and as can email addresses. We did have, this is quite a good example because it is a financial organization within the region. Quite recently, they had some spoof URLs registered. So it was some websites basically with an extra S in that they had someone registered. Now, this suspect had gained access to one of their staff laptops. The staff member had used his own laptops to check his email. It was compromised, and they took some print screens of their email box. So what they had there was a list of, they had some pictures of customers, and they also had some information about what state those customers were in for house buying and things like that. So what they did, they set up these fake domains, and then they sent the customers email addresses. So for instance, if it was Dave at company A, now it was Dave at companies A, and they said, oh, further to our last email, the process has been completed. Our account has recently changed. Please proceed with payment X to here, avoid invoice attached. Okay, so they had some information, and they went down the spoofing route. So they could use fake sites as well to harvest information. That's normally what happens. You probably had a Netflix or a PayPal email or something like that in your personal inbox. You click, it goes to a website that isn't PayPal, but looks very much like PayPal. Excellent. So we've got a poll coming up on the next slide. Have you received a phishing email to your work email account this year? So this really will give us an idea of if your email filters at work are good. A lot of you may be using something like Office 365 or Google Suite or something like that, which have some quite powerful filters built in already. But often a phishing email doesn't just have to come from someone outside the agency. So it could come from someone inside. Recently, we've been seeing, we had a school in Suffolk actually, whose students were receiving phishing emails. And once they'd fallen for it, then they were sending emails to other students and trying to get into teachers' accounts and things like that. So here's a poll. There is a stat while you're just having a look at that. So this is back in April. Google was blocking 100 million phishing emails a day, and a fifth of those related to COVID. So you can see how the attackers do adapt and change their techniques based on the current trends. So they are seeing the opportunity, and they are going for it. Okay, Bridget, can we get the results of this one? Okay, so 56% saying yes, 44 saying no. So those 56, that could be a range. It could be internally. It could be filters need tightening up. It would be interesting there. So if you did say yes, something worth doing is going back to your IT team and saying, this got through. Why did it get through? Can we stop this type of email getting through? What can we put in place? But we're going to talk a little bit more about that moving on. So I mentioned earlier about different types of phishing email. So at the bottom, we've got general phishing, bog standard mail merge, or just an email sent to thousands of people. Next up, we've got spear phishing, where they personalize. So I mentioned mail merge there. This really fits in here. So for instance, there was one going around to individuals at the start of the year, and it basically said, I know what you're doing. I can see your computer, but it introduced with the person's name and a password that they'd used. So they said, hi, John, I know a password you used is Brian4. That's not a real password, by the way. It's very weak. I know this because I've got access to your computer, can see everything you do. Now that is targeted, and it looks quite realistic. So people were quite worried about that. It can be more targeted. So it could be targeted if you, for instance, you have staff details on your website. It could be targeted, hi, Mike, congratulations on the promotion, because they're looking at LinkedIn, and the website talks about what role that person is in. But that does make it more believable. And then the last one is whaling. Now, this is where they go after a individual within an organization, normally financially related. So, that's where it could come from internally. So we've seen this recently where an account internally was compromised and then an email sent from that account to someone else in the organization trying to get them to pay a fake invoice, basically. That could be followed up with a phone call. Sometimes these will be very cleverly done. They'll look and they'll wait for out of offices. They'll look at shared calendars and strike when, the person who they normally seek clarification from is on leave or something like that.
I think this demonstrates the need for strong cyber training, John, at all levels. So it's having the execs and the CFOs with this level of training so they can identify these phishing emails so they're not the victims of these whaling attacks.
Yeah, really good point. And it's really about making sure it's a positive culture as well, not a blame culture. So, making sure that your staff are an extra layer of security, if you like, and reporting into the IT team. Okay, so we've got a little game here. Is this real or fish? Now, I know I spelled real wrong. I'm a fisherman, so it's a pun. This is on the left is an email. It says Office 365. There's a link. We talked about psychology there. So there's errors on your account. You'll be disconnected. Resolve issue now. You click on that button. It opens the page up on the right there. So is this a real email or is it phishing? What do we think? Cast your votes now. I feel like one of those game show hosts. Some glittering backgrounds and bulbs. Okay, so we've got the email, we've got the website. Bridget, could we have the results, please? Wow. Okay. You've probably seen this before. Hopefully you picked up on things like the URL in the email address. They got the color of the Office 365 right. There's a nice button, but it doesn't look quite right. They got a little footer on. But the website, it's not secured, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. That just means there's SSL in place. But the actual URL doesn't look right. But they have cloned the website right. The actual content of the page does look good. So yeah, everyone was right on that one. I've got to make these more difficult. So here's another example. This is smishing. So we've got a text message that's come in. Do you think this is real or phishing? So a text message with a link. And then you can see that when the link has been clicked on, the web page on the right has opened in the browser and it's given you this nice government official looking web page. Just give you a few seconds to consider and cast votes. Okay, can we get the results then, please? Okay, I've got to make this harder, obviously. Yeah, again, this is phishing or smishing. Text messaging tends to be more successful at the moment because on your phone, it's a lot more difficult to investigate links. There was government did send out a message to all people, didn't they, at the start of the COVID pandemic, and there was phishing, smishing messages that followed that up where they spoofed the number, which obviously looked more realistic because it was in the same thread. The email on the right, again, they've ripped the website really well, but yeah, the URL webredirect.org just doesn't look right. It's not a gov domain. Okay, so Chris mentioned staff training. Does your company provide regular cybersecurity training to staff? Okay, so when I say regular, I mean, annual, but also do they provide updates as well, via email, for instance, this is a new attack we saw recently, or don't fall for this, that sort of thing. I've been into quite a lot of businesses, and most businesses tend to do some training at the start. And then unless something happens, it's left for quite a while. So it'd be interesting to see if you guys in the financial sector are a bit more on this, or if you are not. Phishing, main cause of breaches, 45% of all reports to the ICO. Quite scary stats there. When I share this PowerPoint afterwards, it'll be PDF. Quite a lot of the links are hyperlinks. So for instance, the NCSC logo there, you click on that, it will take you to the NCSC website, which has got a e-learning staff animated exercise there. It takes about 25 minutes and you can go through. That has also been recently revised with feedback. And then I also offer staff training and a Lego role-playing game, which is often quite useful for board members and things like that. But we'll talk about that later on. So can we get the results for this one, please? Excellent. So we've got 79%. Yes, we do. Brilliant. 21 no. So obviously there's room for improvement there. It is, it's one of those things. Often I get businesses speak to me, and I had one recently that rang me and went, "Can we do some trading?" I was like, "Oh yeah, okay. I visited you, over a year ago." And they said, "Yep, we just got hit with some mandate fraud." Okay, so it's often very reactive. So I'm really keen to make this more of a proactive approach. So tips for users, this is for everyone. Validate the other party, check who they are, check the email address, hover over links where you can. If it's on your computer, forward them if it's on your phone. Visit sites via known URLs. So go via shortcuts that you've saved, go via search engines, type the URL in. And at the start of the pandemic, NTSC created the suspicious email reporting service. So if you send email to that address, they will action that. And I'll let Chris talk about that in just a second. But you can also forward text messages. So if you get a spoof or a spam text message, you can forward it to 7726 and they'll take action there, which is things like taking the website down and taking it offline for the providers. Chris, did you want to add a bit there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just getting the latest figures, John. So since the suspicious email reporting service was established early this year, I think it was around April, May time. But in that time, I've just put up the latest figures. So as of the end of November, NTSC has had over 4 million reports of suspicious emails received, which has led to the removal of over 22,000 scams and over 43,000 suspicious URLs taken down, which is a fantastic endeavor. And just for this perspective, these are potentially scams and URLs that we may not have known about had it not been for members of the public and organizations reporting these to NCSC. So really what we're seeing now is a collective effort to ensure that the UK remains safe in cyberspace, and we tackle these scams and we take down these fraudsters. So a really great effort from the UK as a whole.
Excellent. And I mentioned that financial organization where a criminal had cloned or created a spoof URL. The business actually found that out. One of the clients sent an email back to them via the proper email saying, "Oh, I think there's something up here." They reported it themselves and it was taken down. So, the system works there. If it's registered in the UK and we can, those URLs can be taken down. Okay, so what can you do about organization? Well, make it difficult for the attackers to reach your users. So a lot of you said you don't get emails. That's probably because, there's technical measures in place to stop those emails getting to the users. And then we talked about training already. Just help the users identify those things. I've spoke to a couple of organizations that actually send phishing emails out to their own staff. I know Microsoft 365 has this as a functionality built in, so you can send emails out, you can see who's clicked on it, that sort of thing. The important thing there is not to make it a blame culture. So I spoke to one organization and they treat that as a disciplinary. If you, after the first one, it counts as a disciplinary. So, you've got to be really careful, because then if someone does click on something later, they're less likely to own up to it, and then the damage is going to be worse. And then, protect your organization. So if someone does click on a link, what measures have you got in place to stop malicious software running and things like that? Respond quickly to incidents. Had an organization who they reported a compromised email compromise, and they actually sent me a log, and the email compromise from actually happening to actually being blocked was 2.5 minutes. The IT admin had got an email, a warning popped up. He went, "That's not right." He blocked the account, he froze the account, and they sent me a minute-by-minute report of what happened, and I was blown away. That's really good. You can register alternative URLs as well, or put them on watch lists. So here's another question. Do you or your organization reuse passwords? Now, be honest here. it's quite entertaining that I do this. I ask the same question to businesses and individuals and in schools as well. And generally, kids are better at not reusing passwords. Now, I hope that's just because they don't have to remember as many, but I also hope that that's just because they've been brought up with this culture. What you're seeing on the screen here, these passwords, these are some of the most common passwords seen in email breach or in password breaches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was seen in over 23 million breaches last year. So that's where companies have, a user signed up to a company and they've been hacked and those details have been stolen. Okay, can we see the results for this one then, please? Okay. Yeah, it's always around almost a 50-50 split with businesses, this one. So I bet if I'd have said reuse or use similar passwords, it would have been higher. There's a great comedy sketch where he talks about, when passwords had to be made harder, people put a 1 at the end. When it asks for special characters, people put an exclamation mark at the end. So all it is your original password with 2 extra characters, and they're quite easy to guess. Excellent. Okay, so we talked about account compromise briefly. Someone signs up for a service, you log in, you use that service. So normally a cloud service, but it could be anything. So, for instance, Amazon, okay, or I'm going to use PlayStation here because it's a live example that I use. So I signed up to PlayStation. At the point, I trust PlayStation with some details. So normally like name, address, password, email address, payment details potentially, and they store them. What happens in an account compromise is someone comes along and either hacks that company and steals that data. Now, hopefully those passwords would be encrypted or at least hashed, but hashes can be broken. But in some cases, they are just in plain text, which is not good. That person would then either sell them or use them themselves. And then someone could try and log into your account and do what they want with that account. But if you're reusing passwords, they could go through and try lots of accounts. Now, this is not someone sitting there trying different passwords. This is someone trying thousands of password combinations at a time. So I'm going to talk later on about a ransomware example, which hit an organization in Suffolk about 5 weeks ago. And it was an email. It was a brute force attack, i.e. they guessed the password. They guessed the password in 72 hours. That's not someone typing for 72 hours. It's a program running on common passwords for 72 hours till it hit the right one. So that's account compromise. In the top right there, there's a website, Have I Been Pwned? What I'd recommend everyone to do when you finish this, if you haven't already, go on there and put your email address in, work, personal, and it will tell you if you've been in any data breaches. So that's not a government site, but it is recommended. You can also register there. You can say, if our work, any emails from any email accounts from our work appear in data breaches, notify us. Okay, so quite a useful service there. Definitely an eye-opener. So, you'll see, have you been in breaches? Which breaches have you been in? And then we've talked about phishing. Someone could just send you a phishing link that tricks you into logging into your service. So I'm using Amazon things, but this could be, a web portal for Sage or, anything like that if it's targeted. Again, here, they're not having to hack anything. You've just given them the details, so then they can go and log in. Okay, so we're on to top tips. All of these top tips come from NCSC. I've put protect your email up there. That's more relevant for personal because every other account normally is reset from your email. But strong separate passwords, 3 random words here, add complexity and numbers and special characters. So a lot of us think, if a password is random, i.e., exclamation mark, letters, uppercase, that's better. Well, the length of a password is key. So 3 random words hopefully will give you a longer password, which is more secure. And you may have chance of remembering it. You should also be looking at password managers and saving passwords in a browser if necessary. Password managers, you rely on one really strong password to access all of your passwords. And those passwords are normally encrypted as well. And then we've got 2-factor authentication. Most of you hopefully are aware of that and what that is. But if you think of it in real world example, you go to a cash point, which you probably haven't had to do recently because you've not been going out, but you would put your card in and you would type in a PIN. So it's something you have, your card, and something your PIN. So most of you are probably used to getting a code on your phone or an app. And then if both of those, then you get granted. So what we're looking at here is if any service you have has 2FA, switch it on. And the one thing that most businesses miss here is things like social media. So if you do have social media, the impact that having your social email compromise, your social media compromise, could be massive. So make sure you've got 2FA on any systems that you can. So here it is. Does your company use 2FA for any of its services? I'm hoping we'll get nice high stats here, but we will see. So some stats here again. So Google did a survey last year, and they found that 65% of people reuse passwords across multiple sites, but 13% used one password for every single account. Now, 13%, I think it was 1,000 people they asked. So that's quite scary. And you can see how an email compromise, once that is out there, if you reuse that password, then, someone has got access to a lot of your accounts. And once they get into your email, they can then go forth and reset other accounts and gain control of them. Okay, a couple of seconds there, sorry. Okay, can we get the answers there then, please? Excellent. Okay, so this is looking good. Your sector generally is pretty hot on this, There's a few people saying no, few people not sure. You would know if you're using a different system. This is definitely a question I'd ask, especially anything relating to financials and publicly accessible information, and also things like cloud services. If you're having staff access cloud services, that second stage will verify that they are who they say they are. Okay, now this is probably one of the more common areas we see is business email compromise. So someone gets into an account and they then change details, they change a regular payment, so that's mandate fraud, or they pretend to be someone internally, request payment. We had a business in Norfolk recently, well, I'll say recently, it was about 7 months ago. They put their payment details in the footer of their email signature. Someone got into their email and just changed the footer. It didn't even get noticed for about 2 months, because obviously they didn't check it. It was on every email they sent until they were like, oh, you still haven't paid this bill from 7 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. And, oh, we did, and then the penny dropped. So be aware of where you put that information as well. Okay, so now I think this will be fairly high. Generally it is when I've spoken to members of your sector as well. So if you do need to change any financial details, or your suppliers do, is there any procedures in place to check that? Now, it could be picking up a phone. I spoke to one company who they only did it via recorded mail, and it was signed and it was verified by phone. So, lots of questions there. One of the things in this link, in this PowerPoint I'll share, is there's this NFIB dashboard. So that's the National Fraud Investigation Bureau. You can access that and you can see the numbers of different crime types within the whole of the UK. So I just filtered that down via Norfolk for January to October, and there's 82 cases of mandate fraud there. Now, I know there's more than 82%. There is, fairly rife underreporting, not going on, but even 82 cases, 782,000. We're not talking about 10 or 20 pounds. We're talking about big numbers here. Okay, can we see the answers for this one then, please? Excellent. So as suspected, pretty high. That's great. Obviously, if you do get new clients on board, you need to make them aware of that, and as well as new suppliers. Looking like I'm preaching to the convert today. Okay, thanks very much. So again, defending your organization, establish those policies, procedures, and ways of handling sensitive information. Be willing to double check, obviously normally you've got the time pressures, but, just bear in mind it's easier to pick up a phone and have that secondary contact. Be wary of providing sensitive company information, be that in email signatures or even, on websites. Review what you include on your website from a social engineering point of view. Okay, so onto a bit more technical area here. So denial of service attack. This is your DOS or DDoS if it's distributed, i.e. coming from multiple sources. So this normally targets things like websites or any internet-facing service. We do see these fairly regularly. We've had 3 in the last month. And the aim is to take the service down, i.e. take a website offline. So they can range in duration. I mentioned about a young lad who did this to his own school. he didn't have any technical ability, really, like Chris mentioned earlier. He just found a service online and paid for it. Often these are normally gaming related, so they'll take people off games because they want better kudos or higher score, but they do commonly target businesses as well. So software as a service, like I say, someone would pay for access to a denial of service attack. Really basic diagram. I'm sure you've all heard of this, but an attacker, someone would go along and say, I want to take out victim's website, and they would pay the attacker some money. The attacker would send that instruction to a botnet, and these are compromised machines around the world, and those machines would all just inundate that website until it fell over. What can we do? So understand the service you use and its limitations. Ask them questions. Is there any DDoS mitigation we can put in place? There are specialist services out there, and have a response plan. I think this is one of my favorite two-word phrases: graceful degradation. I fail smoothly and as expected, and focus on your essential services. Which services can you afford to lose? Which ones do you need to keep running? And test and monitor that. NTSC does offer lots of guidance, and I know Chris is going to talk about this later, but this is an example. They've got some quite nice infographics. Again, when you get this PDF, that is a hyperlink. You can click, you can download it, and there's some good, useful points there to pass to your IT team. Chris, anything to add?
No, I think that's everything, John. I think what you mentioned there about having a response plan is so vital. It's about exercising that response plan as well, which I'll talk about afterwards, but being able to test these incidents in peacetime rather than waiting for the thing to happen. So definitely include DDoS attacks in your response plan and understand how you respond to that sort of attack.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so now on to malicious software, basically software that is designed to cause damage to a system. There's lots of different ones. You've heard of things like viruses, Trojans, worms, all that sort of thing. Normally, these are triggered by a user clicking on something, running a macro, opening an attachment, plugging in a USB they found in the car park that says HR or something like that. There's lots of different ways for this, but the main one, and we are seeing quite a lot of this locally. Only this morning, we got another business that had been victim of a ransomware attack. There's been a couple of high-profile ones in the region locally as well. So ransomware, i.e., software that is aiming to encrypt or jumble up all of your important files and make you pay a ransom to get access to them. So it will target specific file extensions. So I had one person, it was an IT admin last week. They came into the office, someone was saying something wasn't working. He connected to the server remotely. Everything looked fine, but there's a file on the desktop saying you've been ransomwared. And open it up and it says we've encrypted all your, and it just gave a list of files: Excel files, database files, PDFs, Word documents, all of these different file types, videos, MP3s, all those sorts of things. They're all encrypted. If you want access to them, follow this link and pay some money. They can cross networks. So the business that got ransomware, it was actually a couple of days ago, but they reported it last night. They disconnect devices, but it still jumped across Wi-Fi to their backups because their backups were connected to the same network. And I mentioned earlier, they can sit dormant for a while. So an attacker could sit in a network for a period of time to make sure that ransomware is embedded into backups. If someone got into a network today and launched a ransomware tonight, but knew you had a backup yesterday, that's not as impactful if they got into an account or a network 6 months ago, scoped it all out, launched a ransomware, and knew that 6 months of your backups were also compromised. And then a new one here is data being taken off the network. I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute. Requires payment. So I had a really good question in a recent one. They said, well, then you can follow the money. Well, you can, but they normally ask for payment via a cryptocurrency, and they'll go through mixers and things like that. So it's normally quite tricky to follow, and it normally moves out of the UK very quickly. Again, software as a service. So the same person that finds a compromise or gets into a business's accounts wouldn't be the same person who wrote the ransomware. There's some specific strains of ransomware, and people would go, I need ransomware. Yeah, I'm going to go to Ransomware or Us. They'll get 10% of any payment made by the company. I'll get 90%, but they'll deal with the software. They'll deal with the payments and the washing the cash and all those sorts of things. So This is a strain of ransomware that is quite prevalent at the moment. I think we've had 4 in the last 7 weeks recently in Norfolk and Suffolk. So there's different attack vectors, i.e. ways into a system, phishing emails, a vulnerability or a weakness in a system that hasn't been updated, represented by a bug here at the bottom left. And then the case I'm going to talk to you about via remote access. So an organization in Suffolk opened up, they obviously people working from home, so they opened up their access to their network so people could dial in, access files and things like that. I say dial in, obviously it's not via modem anymore. They managed to brute force a password. So it took 72 hours, as I mentioned earlier, and they got into an account. So they had a program running. Now, lots of things you could do there. The system should have gone, hang on, why is this person trying lots of passwords? I'm blocking them. But it didn't. So there's a vulnerability in the network there itself. But once they got in, they elevated their privileges. They looked around the network. They found it was quite big. They sat there for, I believe it was 20 days until they executed the ransomware. The day after the company had decided, the organization had decided that, they'd have more staff back in the office. Then there's only really 2 options. Do you pay or do you not pay? And if you do pay, what guarantees have you got that you're going to get that information back? So the example here I'm talking about, the link was to a dark website. The actual ransom was $350,000. Okay, so obviously not realistic for this organization. So they didn't pay, but they then realized that actually 10 gig of data had been taken off the network. And because that had been taken off before the ransomware had run, all the logs were encrypted. So they have no idea what data has been stolen from their network. And I spoke to a national lead on this strain of ransomware. And that is now, if they don't pay, what they do is they, or maybe even if they do, they auction that data off on a eBay style dark web site for other people then to use potentially to extract information from the business. So you've got lots of impacts here. You've got productivity, the system's down, staff can't do things. You've got data loss. Okay, you've got sensitive data leaked or sold off. So you've got to report to ICO, you've got potential fines, and you've got reputational damage. So, one attack, lots of things to consider there.
And these may not be single individuals who are carrying out these ransomware attacks. Ransomware is a lucrative business. And some of these strands of ransomware will even have call centers set up, huge teams behind it, where you can negotiate with the corporates to in terms of how you pay the ransom. So as John said, these can be huge costs. So the attackers may be willing to negotiate to lower the costs. So this is a huge business for cyber criminals. But as John said, even if you do pay, there's no guarantee you get the money back, and you open yourself up to show that you're a victim who is willing to pay. So you open yourself up to further attacks.
Yeah, really important there. The further attack thing is, once you're on that list, you're there. So another question: do you back up important data regularly, and do you test these backups? Now, it's a yes/no here. If you don't know, for your business point of view, consider yourself. Do you back up your important data regularly? But if you do know for your business, then that would be great. So this is a stat I found recently talking about how ransomware had increased by 80% in the last 3 months. Obviously, with more people working remotely, there's more people accessing data remotely. So there's more attack vectors, ways to get into systems as well. Okay, how are we looking there then? Awesome. So 87 yes, 13 no. Yeah, that's good. The key thing here is testing those backups, and also, is it a robust strategy? I.e., how many copies of backups do you keep, and do you validate those backups regularly? Do you check them? Do you scan them? Where do you store them? How quickly would it take you to recover? Okay. Jump forward a couple there. Okay, so what can we do? We talked about robust backups, prevent malware from running on devices and on systems. If a device does get infected, remove it from the network straight away to try and stop it spreading. As we mentioned earlier, preparing for an incident is really important. Have a run through, have a dry run through. Again, NCSC guidance at the top there. That's a hyperlink that will link you out to your organization. Okay, so this is one of, I don't think we've got too many questions left, but in your organization, do you limit access to data? I'm expecting, again, high numbers because the financial sector has always been pretty good at this. Human error caused 90% of cyber breaches. That's what the ICO said last year. 45% of those, as we found out earlier, from phishing. But you do get other ones. You do get people accidentally forwarding emails and things like that. Okay, I think we can probably get the answers on this one. Expecting high numbers here of a yes. Yeah, excellent. Another important question here is, are they revised? If a person moves or leaves an organization, how promptly are those accesses revoked or revised? Okay, Chris, I think I'm going to hand over to you here.
Thank you, John. So insider threat is a huge problem within organizations because we now need to understand that cybersecurity is a human problem. That we have to manage the technology and the IT that comes with cybersecurity, but we also need to take stock of the people and the processes within our organization. Now, we can break insider threats into really three categories. So we have the negligent insider threat, that individual or group of individuals who clicks on a link which is malicious, or forwards and opens a documentation which causes malicious software to spread. And what's important to recognize here is that any one of us could be an insider threat when it comes to a cyber incident. That we receive so many emails in a day, and phishing emails are looking more and more genuine, especially spear phishing and whaling emails. It's important that individuals in your organization have the correct training and skill set to identify suspicious emails and suspicious activity, to then be able to report that upwards and onwards. But we also have malicious actors as well, people who potentially sit within an organization or who've just left, who are disgruntled and have a certain level of access to the company data. So there was a fantastic case study not too long ago about an individual who left a marketing organization following a merger. That individual left disgruntled, but still had access to company data and company networks once she's left. So, in this example, having passwords to cloud providers or cloud services, I was able to delete huge strands of data and documentation from that business, and as a result, the business had to go under and had to lay people off. So, as John said there, it's important that not only do we limit the access we have within our organization to potential data, but that once an individual leaves the organization, that their accounts and their privileges are revoked once they leave. Because leave access is something which is often not considered, or not considered as important. So it's important that within your IT teams, your IT departments, that once an individual leaves, that they revoke the access. And just there, we have on the screen some of the tips I mentioned about having staff training and awareness, and encouraging staff to report anything suspicious as well. What we often find within organizations is that individuals are scared to report an incident or report something suspicious for fear of being shown to do something wrong, or concern that they have acted incorrectly. It's important that organizations create an environment where people feel confident to report suspicious activity, because time and time again, the biggest mistake a business can make is not dealing with it quick enough and trying to bury their heads in the sand and deal with it internally. If your organization or a business suffers a cyber breach, it's about being able to respond quickly, because the quicker you can respond, the better you have of recovering from the cyber incident, which is why businesses need to encourage staff to report anything suspicious as soon as possible. And again, it comes down to that no blame culture. Encourage reporting of accidental actions. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and often cyber incidents occur because of human error. So it's important that we recognise that there's a risk there when it comes to insider threats. So create that no blame culture and ensure your staff have the correct level of training and awareness. And just comes to something we mentioned about having a principle of least privilege. So even if your organization is compromised or an individual is compromised, the attacker doesn't have privileged access into sensitive data in the organization, which is where we talk about access controls, about having multi-factor authentication and device whitelisting. Now, whitelisting being the opposite of blacklisting. So rather than blocking all of the bad stuff coming in, whitelisting is simply a list of all the devices that you allow to connect to your network and access. So make sure that within your IT teams, your IT departments, you have the correct access controls to prevent that insider threat, whether negligent or malicious. And good practices such as keeping logs, actively monitoring the systems, all of which IT departments should be doing on a regular basis and reviewing those logs. So if there is compromise, there's logs of the activity, and we can monitor as the situation progresses. So some really fantastic actions there that all organizations and businesses can implement for little to no cost. We're not talking about huge IT infrastructure here. These are the baseline cybersecurity controls that all businesses should be carrying out to prevent insider threats. So we've run through some really difficult strands of cybercrime and cyber attacks, but this doesn't mean that the defenses have to be complicated or complex. And in fact, just doing the basic security controls will prevent cyber criminals coming after your business, because cyber criminals are just like us. They are dependent by time and resource, and a cyber criminal who's after a quick financial gain will go elsewhere if they cannot compromise your business. That if your business has the baseline cybersecurity controls in place, cyber criminals will go elsewhere. Cyber criminals want to go after the low-hanging fruits and not spend intensive resource and time to try and compromise your business. So there we have top tips about updating your devices, so making sure that your devices are patched and have the latest software in place, having antivirus in place, and again coming back to having robust backups of your most important data, which I'll talk a bit about afterwards. And about having the correct relevant policies and procedures in place as well. So when we look at cyber resilience, we can think of our cyber resiliency in terms of people, technology, and processes. So making sure that your organization has the correct policies and processes in place to deal with a cyber instance and understand the consequences that come from a cyber breach. And we spoke about limiting physical access to computers and services. So making sure that your employees work on a basis of least privilege. So giving individuals the least amount of privilege possible in order to allow them to do their jobs, which comes in with restricting and enforcing strict access to data and encrypt sensitive data, all of which can be carried out by your administrators, and ensuring that you practice strong cyber hygiene with your organizations, that you lock down the most sensitive data in your organization and make sure that is regularly backed up. So if that data is compromised, you can access it from the backup in a quick and concise manner. And make yourself aware of cybersecurity threats and how to deal with them. This is a difficult environment to be speaking with. When people think of cybersecurity, they think this is an IT issue. Cybersecurity is first and foremost a collective responsibility, that everybody has responsibility when it comes to cybersecurity. Everyone from the chief exec to the employees carrying out the administration of your organization. So really it's about having that culture where we can talk about cybersecurity and the need for security controls and why individuals are restricted from certain access, and having those correct policies as well. By no means is this an easy topic to contend with. It's a complicated environment, but it's about having those internal conversations within your business, but also with your supply chain as well.
just to jump in there, Chris, I think something else that needs to be considered is actual physical access to rooms, devices.
Absolutely.
But the person turning up saying, "I'm here to service the printer," how do you know that's the right person? Are they from the printer company, or are they installing a packet sniffer on the network to identify traffic? So have those considerations. It's not all back end people in cupboards. It's does the receptionist, is she going to question people? Is there, if Brian is at the coffee machine and someone goes, "Oh yeah, I'm from the office over the road," or "I've just started," is there any checks in place? And I think this is really important now that people are going back to a workplace. There's been lots of people who've maybe been working from home. I can see attackers just coming, I got the job during lockdown. Did you not get the email? And trying to blag their way into organizations. So, it's not all software and hardware. There is that physical access onto sites as well.
Unfortunately, because we're all British, we don't like confrontation. But it's important that we do challenge people who aren't wearing ID or who we don't recognise. There's the infamous 2 coffee cup trick, where an attacker can have 2 coffee cups and you hold the door open for them. These are the sorts of behaviours that we need to stamp out and start challenging individuals who look suspicious or don't have the correct identification, and make sure that starts at the very bottom. And this is where we talk about having layers of defence. That that individuals are the first and last line of defence, to make sure individuals, you have that culture of challenging suspicious activity. So we at the NCSC, we have a host of products and guidance in place to help businesses navigate their way through the cybersecurity landscape and look at embedding strong cybersecurity controls. Because, as I mentioned in the Q&A, cybersecurity needn't be a costly investment for businesses. And we believe that cybersecurity should be accessible for everybody, because it's a problem we all face, and it's also something we need to be aware of. So one of the first pieces of guidance we've created was the Small Business Guide, which was launched back in 2017, but which was revamped earlier this year to bring that guidance up to date with current trends and guidance. Now, while this is called the Small Business Guide, this is a baseline of what all businesses should be doing. So all businesses should be backing up our most critical data, protecting from malware, ensuring our devices are safe through patching and updates, around password protection, and avoiding phishing attacks, because as we've seen, phishing attacks are one of the most prevalent ways a cyber criminal can compromise your business. So the Small Business Guide breaks down each of those 5 steps into 5 actions, which allows businesses to walk through those. And these are steps that any business can implement, regardless of shape, size, or sector. These are steps that we should all be doing within our organizations. And then we have the 10 steps to cybersecurity as well, which is actions businesses in the financial sector should be implementing, because this really creates a holistic picture of cybersecurity and the risk mitigation that it comes. And what this allows you to do is open a conversation up with your exec boards to make sure that cybersecurity is a risk on your business register, and that you have the correct policies in place to have strong security controls and be able to respond and recover from a cyber incident. So this is really about bringing in the wider business, bringing in the chief exec, the CFOs, CTOs, to make sure that your organization is protected from the main strands of cyber activity. Next slide, John. Wicked. But as we know, there is no such thing as a perfect defense, and with enough time and resource, threat actors can compromise your business. And what I say to businesses is that it's not a question of if, but when you're a victim of a cyber incident. Because gone are the days of thinking that, why would a cyber criminal ever come after me? I'm just a X, Y, Z organization. Any business now is a target for a cyber criminal. And this is why it's important that businesses have response and recovery mechanisms in place to deal with a cyber incident, which is why we created the response and recovery guidance, which takes businesses through those 5 steps of how to prepare for incidents, how to identify your most critical assets, your most critical data, how to protect that data, and how to exercise that plan. Because as we know, no plan survives first contact. So it's important that once you have a plan in place, that you exercise and make sure it is robust enough to so you can respond to an incident. So then you can then identify what's happening. You can resolve the incident and report it to stakeholders and learn from that incident. So the response recovery guide really takes you through that circular journey about preparing, respond, recover, learning from the incident, and then improving your response mechanisms and your disaster recovery planning. So it's important that risk is part of your business continuity plans, and that you build your cybersecurity mechanisms in place to be able to respond to a cyber incident. Next slide, John. So we created the exercise in a box toolkit, which is an online tool to help businesses first and foremost determine how resilient they are to a cyber attack. So really understand your current capabilities and your current understanding of a cyber incident. So the exercise in the box is a series of tabletop exercises which take anywhere between an hour and an hour and a half to complete. And you walk through that particular exercise, and at the end of it, you create a report detailing where your weaknesses are, what needs to be improved, and how to move forward with your business continuity planning. It's a fantastic resource. We're adding more and more exercises to it as we develop the tool. I'll post a link to the resource in the chat functionality. But if you haven't looked at it already, please go away, have a look at the exercise in the box, because it really helps businesses understand their current cybersecurity capabilities and how vulnerable they are to potential cyber incidents. Next slide, John. And then we spoke about the importance of cybersecurity training. This is not exercise in the box, but this is our top tips for staff. It's the e-learning package, which John mentioned earlier, which is a 25-minute training pack, which all employees can walk through, and that will train your employees around the risks of a cyber breach, what to look out for, what is a phishing email, what is a ransomware attack, which allows organizations to create a baseline of cyber proficiency among the workforce. That way that you know that you've implemented a level of training. It's a fantastic resource. Again, if you want to test your own understanding, or if you feel you want to get more learning in cybersecurity, I'll post a link to the training as well, and definitely go check that out.
Just had a quick
question. Finally, yes.
Yeah, so a quick question's come in from Steve Davidson. He says, does working from home increase cyber security risks for firms? What can you do about it? Should we do a joint effort on this one? Do you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a fantastic question, Steve, because we're now introducing a level of risk and vulnerability that we hadn't seen before, and organizations maybe not planned for, especially businesses as well, where remote working is a new concept and something they haven't rolled out in a very mainstream way. It definitely increased cybersecurity risk, but I think there are now different factors to contend with. So you now have your IT infrastructure out of the office environment where it's safe. So individuals now are responsible for looking after their laptop, and if they're traveling about with either laptops or phones, is there a risk of that device being broken or stolen or lost? And whether there's a policy and process in place for being able to deal with that. So one of the biggest issues when it comes to remote working is the loss of devices or stolen devices. So does your business have a policy for being able to wipe, to locate the device remotely, or if you can't be if you can't gain access to the device, can it be wiped remotely? So these are the risks we need to consider as well. And it's also working in a insecure environment. So are members of the household privy to conversations and information that they shouldn't be? So these are the factors that we really need to look at. In terms of what we can do about it, it's having those home working policies and implementing that level of security and guidance, making sure staff are aware of their environment, and if they are having sensitive conversations, that they're only ones who are listening to that conversation. John, I'd love to hear what you thought.
Yeah, agree with everything you've said. I think there's also it's ironic that as we're more digitally connected, but we're less likely to start a conversation when we're at home. So traditionally, if you had a question or you weren't sure about something, you'd probably pop round the office and speak to someone. But now you're like, oh well, I better not bother them. They might have set their thing to busy, or so, or should I? No, I'll do what I think. So it's interesting that we're more connected, but we're less likely to seek help. Maybe I think that's the psychological thing. And then you've also got is the device company owned? Is it a BYOD? Bring your own device. Those sorts of things to consider. So I mean, it's one of those areas. Yes, it does increase security risk. Is it manageable? Definitely. Is it an opportunity? I know there's lots. So county councils, for instance, I know they've found it actually really useful because they say they can identify savings they can make on buildings and things like that. How's productivity affected? I think it's one of those things that needs to be managed, but it is see it as an opportunity, not as something you have to do. It's an opportunity to change the way of working, but it has been enforced on us with COVID.
And we produced some guidance to the beginning of the COVID pandemic about home working. So some of the security risks businesses need to be aware of and how to mitigate those. So I'll post a link to that guidance shortly afterwards. And finally, I just want to finish on the Cyber Essentials certification. Cyber Essentials, for those who aren't aware, is a government-backed scheme that helps all businesses protect themselves from the most common cyber threats. So this is similar to the 10 steps to cybersecurity that we at NCAC have produced, but looks at further control measures. Now, certification costs, it's £300 to be certified, so it's a self-assessment. Once you go through that self-assessment, a third-party certifier will check to make sure that your organization is secure and award you the Cyber Essentials certification. But in terms of what you get from it, first off, it demonstrates you have a baseline cybersecurity and you take cybersecurity seriously, and it potentially opens up your ability to bid for contracts which require Cyber Essentials. I know a number of government contracts stipulate that businesses have Cyber Essentials certification before bidding for that contract. And with it as well, you get a level of cyber liability insurance. So if you are the victim of a cyber crime, there's a certain level of insurance in place there as well. And cyber insurance is definitely a conversation we could have for the rest of the day. But if anybody has any questions about the certification or about any NCSC product in general, or any just general cybersecurity questions, I'm happy to take those for the round of the session. So John, thank you. I'll pass back to you just to close the session.
Great. Yeah. So now on to what we can do locally. So Cyber Basics Review. So Chris mentioned Cyber Essentials there. Cyber Basics Review is a little in-house check. I know I can see a couple of attendees we've walked through this with. It's 80 questions, basically. It takes about an hour, and they're a risk-rated report. It's in line with Cyber Essentials. Obviously, it's a step below Cyber Essentials, but it gives you a good feeling for if you're on course. I also deliver messages, presentations, training to staff, individuals, and things like that. You might have seen me at various networking events. I mentioned Lego earlier. This is one of the more fun events. It's basically a Lego role-playing cyber attack game, and it's role play. You get cards, you play cards, you get a budget. Really good to get people who traditionally haven't thought about cybersecurity, realizing the importance and the measures that need to be taken. And then CISP, if in more of a technical area, so a knowledge sharing platform, we can act as a sponsor for that. And then general signposting and awareness. And a couple of things that are fairly hot off the press I wanted to mention is, one is called Cyber Alarm, which I'll include in the link, which is a system that can sit on your services and report incidents and trends and things like that, and you'll get live data back from that. I'll include a link about that. That's being rolled out nationally. It's coming to our region in the next 7 to 10 days, hopefully. And then cyber resilience centers. So what the government have noticed is that there's lots of companies providing cybersecurity advice and guidance, but it's not very centralized and it's very difficult to find. And it's, do you trust it? What do you do? So cyber resilience centers are popping up around the country, and the one in the eastern region is looking to be up and running Q1/Q2 next year. What they will do is they will have preferred members, if you like, people that have been quality checked, that can deliver cyber essentials, but can also deliver other services. They will also have a training program for students who are completing cybersecurity degrees, and they will be offering vulnerability scanning and assessments and things like that at reduced business rates to organizations. Membership is going to be free, but obviously for some of the extra services there is a cost, but the idea is that they're going to be greatly reduced. And then, if you did a vulnerability scan, it identified some things, you could then be referred to a partner agency that we recommend to you, or the Cyber Resilience Centre recommend, to do further advice and guidance. So that's something really exciting on the horizon. If you're a victim, report, please. There is big problems with underreporting. You can report live cyber attacks. Now, I appreciate businesses want to get up and running, but often when I speak to a business, they go, "Oh, it happened last week. I'm reporting it because the insurance said we had to." Okay, have you got any evidence? Nope, we wiped everything. So from our point of view, that really puts a dampener on things, because there's not much we can do without any evidence. So keep copies of logs, IP addresses, take photos of emails, even anything like that is useful and gives us a line for inquiry. So Action Fraud is the main reporting mechanism. They would pass it into the NFIB, who would report it to a local force, unless it's a live attack, in which case it would go directly to NCSC and it would be triaged there and would be sent out then for lifetime action, either by national agency or local agency, depending on severity. And then almost there, just some useful links here. So again, we've talked about how I've empowered, and I know someone in the chat, Richard, mentioned this as well. Really useful site. There's some more on here. Cyberware and NCSC we've talked about as well. CISP we've mentioned, and Action Fraud for reporting. So last slide. As a result of this presentation, will you be reviewing your company's cyber security? So I think we're going to get a lot of already savvies here. One of the key things, I saw someone just sent a comment to me directly saying, we do a lot of this stuff, but can I pass this on to other organizations? Definitely. We're running another event on the 13th of January, which is open to all organizations. So, it doesn't matter if you're a sole trader or a larger SME. A lot of everything we've covered here is relevant to you. And just leaving with some contact details on the last, on the left, myself, and on the right, NCSC. And at the bottom, there is a link redirect to a survey. I'll be sending that out anyway. That's just to see how we can improve this and how you thought it went today. So let's see the results for this. Oh, good. Excellent. Okay, so 67% saying yes, you will. That's really good news. That's the aim of the game. That's what we're looking to do, really. So I'm glad there's been people thinking about that. You've got all those resources on NCSC. I know Chris has been putting some in the chat, and we'll get those links in an email out to you after the event with PDF. Some are saying already savvy. That is music to my ears. If ultimately, if everyone was 100%, I wouldn't have a job, which would be a bit of a downer. But the world, the UK, and especially Norfolk and Suffolk, would be a safer place. So that's it for me. I think we're going to do questions, and Tim may well be coming back on.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much, John, and thanks so much, Chris. What a wealth of resources there. Very practical stuff. Really good engagement, interaction on the polls, everybody. So thank you for joining in. But I think we can consider that this was a great success. If 67% of you are going to be taking some steps, beyond today, that's wonderful news. And thank you, Steve, for also sort of asking that question, which I think has been on everyone's mind this year. Is how do we really go about addressing cyber risk in a working from home environment? And what I was hearing throughout that was a lot of this is common sense, but it's about management, it's about leadership and culture as much as it is about technology. And I think those, as Chris, you said, people, process, people, technology, and process. The people bit, that is massively important, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's one area that tends to get overlooked, and gone are the days of cybersecurity just being about the IT and technology. It's that holistic approach to a business. You are your cybersecurity.
Okay, so I think we got the opportunity, if anyone hasn't had a chance to ask a question of John and Chris, to put that into the Q&A function as we speak. But I mean, Steve, what are your reflections, having have had quite a deep dive into cybersecurity? How secure are you feeling now?
Yeah, well, I thought that was a really fantastic presentation today, and I mean, all my thanks to John and Chris there for going through it. Actually, it kept my interest all the way through, and I'm sure that all the people that were on the call today, I'm sure they all think the same as I do. I think there was some really scary points in there, actually, and but if I was to look at it in a more glass half full way, I would say that there was also some great signposts to the sort of resources that you can get. And I mean, I've learned something new today, which I thought was the story of my life, really, but the concept of graceful degradation, which was probably, I thought, something to do with the story of my life, but actually it's actually about a response plan, and I noted it down for future reference. So that was quite good fun. I would just say that if there's any residual questions that people have, because there's not enough time, or we need a deeper dive on any of this stuff in terms of any of the issues that came up today, I mean, please feel free to get in touch with FIG, and we can arrange this through Norfolk County Council. I think our details will come up on the screen in a minute, but I thought it was really, really, really fantastic today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I think during the session there was a very good question from Dickon about SMEs and how easy it is to implement some of this stuff if you're a small organization, which Chris answered. And yes, there's clearly a whole bunch of free or low cost resources out there. Quickly, we've got a question in from Luke Power. John and Chris, I hope you can see that, but historically we would be targeting our computers without antivirus software. Should we be more worried about viruses and malware?
Yes, we should all be more worried about malware and viruses all the time, because they are becoming more prevalent. And what we're finding now with common strands of malware viruses is that they're able to penetrate antivirus and firewalls, because they just grow in sophistication. That doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it, and all businesses shouldn't fail of the perfect approach fallacy. There's no such thing as perfect defense. I think all we can do is just do our best, manage the risk, and just keep improving over time. I say time again, this isn't a simple solution. We're not going to solve this overnight, but it's about that continual improvement and development, and that is the way we're going to beat cyber criminals, by having those conversations and keep talking about the risks. So to Luke, yes, definitely look at NCSC guides and products, look at about mitigating malware and virus, and just take it one day at a time. John, your thoughts?
No, I mean, everything there, great. I think also we've mentioned it earlier about layers. So, yes, you might have scanners and things like that, but if it does get through, have you got, a system that would report unusual activity? Have you got systems that would prevent executables from running? have you got things that would identify if privileges are being elevated and those sorts of things. So think of it like an onion skin. You've got different layers, and ultimately, yes, they might get through a number of these layers, but each one should filter out some forms of attackers. So strength in depth is really useful and important there as well.
That's great answers. So we are just about 1 minute before 4 o'clock. Thank you to all of those who've attended this afternoon for staying on the call until 4 and hopefully absorbing all of that information. As we said earlier, this has been recorded and will be available both through the FIG and Techies websites. And yes, just a quick plug for the event coming up on 13th of January, when we will be covering some of this ground again for a broad SME audience. So if you have colleagues who've missed this and want to join in, or you want to come back and ask some more questions, please do. So I think it only remains for me to do two things. One is to just share with you the FIG contact details. Let me, sorry, trying to do too many things with my my screen. Hold on.
While you're doing that, Tim, I would probably, I want to just give a number of thanks, if that's possible. Just
thank you, Steve.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and the team at Tech East for working with us on this. I particularly want to thank John and Chris for their time today. It was fantastic, and thank you very much to them. I also like to thank Norfolk County Council and the New Anglia Let, if that's possible. And last but not least, the FIG events team. We are looking to organize more seminars in 2021. And we're really looking forward to the day again when we can meet with you all again in person, and maybe over a glass of wine, and maybe the return of the annual conference later in the year again. And that would be a great thing if we were able to achieve that, if we can achieve that next year. So here's the FIG contact points, the website. Please go on the website, use it. Any ideas, feedback, etc., let us know on info@fignorwich.org. And please feel free to contact us if you want any more deep dives on cybersecurity. Just maybe wrap up now by saying thanks for attending the session today. I hope you all have a great break over Christmas and that you have a happy and prosperous new year when it comes. And I'm certain that 2021 is going to be better than 2020. And so cheerio to everybody, and thanks for attending, and cheers.